Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Every
passing year and I feel just the same. Who's that person in the mirror? I don't know her name. I'm out here living life all on my own, feeling passion over nothing and just working to the bone. Fragmented, I'm fragmented. In every way I'm cut, and every day I'm stuck, and so much of me is in pieces. Fragmented, I'm fragmented. I need a fiery soul to make me whole. I'm just not enough. The power I see that lived in you, I can't deny. But now that you're gone, just who am I? Who am I? Fragmented, I'm fragmented. How could there be someone for me when so much of me is in pieces? Fragmented, I'm fragmented. Another day goes by. Should I even try to open my heart? Fragmented, fragmented, fragmented. Make me whole.
Hello, friends. Hello, Facebook friends. I'm here today with my friend Jan Warner. We're going to talk about grief. And what you just saw is a song called Fragmented in our show, SuperYou. And it's a moment that everyone connects with because there's a through line of pain that we all can relate to. And especially now during the pandemic, during these uncertain times, I think we're all experiencing some element of grief. So I thought it was imperative to bring Jan into our world and talk to her a little bit about grief. Jan has become a bit of an expert. Shall I say you're a bit of an expert, Jan, on grief?
Okay. No, I'm ordinarily, extraordinarily ordinary.
And I think that's what's the best part about it, because you are speaking from the point of view that everyone can relate to. In your book called Grief Day by Day, you give a really practical guide to how to navigate through grief in a lot of different ways. Loneliness, memories, who am I now? Unhealthy coping mechanisms, faith, wearing a mask, mood swings, so much left unsaid, so much left undone, friends and family, supportive, unkind, or simply gone. That's a good one. And you know, going all the way to acceptance and healing, it runs full gamut, and you can pretty much touch upon it. Fragmented, the song is about how we feel in so many pieces. And the best part about this book, I feel, is that all those pieces, wherever you feel like you want to touch upon, you can go to the beginning and read about that section. And I love the way this book is organized. So tell me, Jan, I'd love to know the catalyst for your grief. Can you tell everyone what happened?
Yes, and I'm gonna start in a different place just because I never noticed it before.
Yes.
It always makes me cry wherever I hear it. It's not the first time I've heard it, but I never heard the last line that said, "Please make me whole." And I heard it this time because I realized that part of my accepting my grief is that I don't ask to be whole at that end. I'm always going to be a little fragmented, and that's okay. Whole is my fragmentation is my wholeness. My husband, Artie, died 11 years ago now, which is like impossible to believe. And he was older than I was. And I thought that I would miss him and I would be sad. And then when he actually died, I felt like a house in a hurricane that had been blown to bits. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know why I was. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't come and get me. I thought about suicide because I thought maybe if I was a good wife, I would go to him. And then I couldn't give that grief to other people, and I decided to live. And I thought, what do I do? And he was a recovering alcoholic, and he was available to other drug addicts and alcoholics 24/7. And so I said, I can honor him. This wasn't at the beginning. It took me a while to get the fragmented pieces into some sort of beautiful mosaic, because that's what beautiful mosaics are made out of. They're made out of broken pieces. And I said, I can make myself available to grieving people. And if I write one blog piece and it reaches one person, that's enough. So that's how it started.
And it's beautiful. A question for you. It's been 11 years and you still feel this grief. So tell me, is there a time limit to grief?
No. I have known people who have said, I want to be released from grief, or I want to walk in the sunshine again. And they feel that. For me and for many people, grief just becomes a companion. It's part of my life. And it's because I went to a therapist once that was trying to deal with the trauma that happened 11 years ago. And I kept explaining to him, no, it happens every day. Every day I wake up in the morning and my husband is still dead. The joke that it's been 11 years and he hasn't come back once to visit, how rude. But that's what grief is. So it's more about and making it part of life than it is making the missing go away. The missing doesn't go away. He's irreplaceable. Whoever you love that dies. I had a grandmother whose daughter died, and she said 74 years later, I'm still grieving for her. But hopefully by that point, the grief isn't this big black abyss that you can't get out of. The grief is filled with love and light and good memories and all kinds of things.
I understand it. I had mentioned that I had a grandma who was my matriarchal figure because my mom was more the toughie, and she would push me to be an achiever, and my grandma would be the huggy one and the loving one. And this happened when I was 14, so many years ago, and I'm still not really over it. She's still very much alive in me, but there's a reframing that eventually has happened with me. And I had mentioned that, you know, she would create these blankets, and she would knit them and drop her hairs into the blankets. It would just happen all of a sudden. And I would want her to get rid of those hairs because it wasn't the perfect blanket. And now looking back at this blanket that I still have, her hairs are the special parts of it. It's the thing that I cherish the most, and she's very much alive. But that gets me to my next question, which is about tame grief. You talk about being a grief whisperer, and that essentially grief just becomes something that you don't need to try to force it away. You can be very much alive with the grief. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jan?
Yeah, I would be dishonest to say I don't get thwacked. I like the word thwack because sometimes the grief becomes overwhelming, and it's a normal process. They even call it grief bursts or grief attacks. So sometimes I'm successful at taking this fire-breathing dragon and turning it into like a little cuddly pet. And sometimes I'm just, it's like I'll schedule a day to collapse. It's a process. A couple of things happened. One was I realized that I always thought of my husband as dead. I have a dead husband. My husband is dead. And then I thought, wait a minute, that makes me really sad. He's really alive. We had 23 years together, full of wonderful times and horrible times. We fought. We weren't perfect. We weren't like, I love you all the time. Sometimes we were, I love you. And sometimes we were slamming doors. But why should I have his death matter more than his life? He did so much good for so many people. Why would I always just say my dead husband and make it as though the 23 years didn't happen? So that helped me a lot, because when I think of him, and I also think of him as young and healthy, I can tell you every second of the night he died. But it's much more fun to talk about staying up all night and singing songs, and I have a horrible voice, and realizing the sun was coming. Or
Yes.
That's all fun. It's like the story you just told me about your grandmother. And the other thing is that what seems like forever to me in terms of eternity is a blink of an eye. So the part of me that's always waiting for him, I can decorate the waiting room. I can make the waiting room of my life magical. And now that it's been 11 years, had I never left my room, well, I wouldn't have met you, for one thing. But all this magical stuff that has happened to me in the past 11 years would not have happened had he come and gotten me. And I call them taps on the head. He's saying, yeah, that's why I didn't come get you, because I knew you had stuff left to do. So that's part of it, finding the stuff you have left to do.
and you sure have done stuff, Jan, because besides writing this amazing book, once again, Grief Day by Day, get it now. Besides writing this amazing book, you have created a bustling community called Grief Speaks Out on Facebook. There's 2.4 million subscribers. Would you ever have imagined that many people would gravitate to this page? How did it form? How is it continuing to unfold? Because it's in every country throughout the entire world. Tell me about that page.
I can't even imagine it now. That's part of my personality, is learning to take in the footprint that I have in the world. I was writing a blog and I was getting a fair number of hits, and I don't write the blog anymore because the page takes so much time. It's at griefspeaksout.net, and it's a nice body of work, so it still gets a lot of hits. And somebody one day said, start a Facebook page. And I said, what? And she said, start a Facebook page. So I looked up and I put Grief Speaks Out, and I put myself as the admin. And then she said, oh, good, I liked it. And then I went, uh-oh, I have to put something on it now because somebody liked it. And I started posting, and I remember trying to get the first 100 likes, telling all my friends to like it, and then thinking that 1,000 likes would be respectable. And what I find is that there's something about almost every culture where people don't like to talk about grief. And I do control the page. You have to share your own experience. You can't judge anybody. You can't tell anybody how to think, how to believe, how to feel. You can't be political. You can't. You just talk about how you experience grief, and the fact that I had a mom once who posted that her daughter was murdered, and she's international because she has a friend in Liberia and a friend in Australia. That it just seems to be that somebody in Vietnam, somebody in Kenya, somebody in Australia, somebody in South Africa, somebody who believes XYZ, somebody who believes the exact opposite when it talks about how they feel. I also thought that I would only relate to people who had lost a husband or wife, but it doesn't matter. What we're saying about how grieving feels is, it doesn't matter who's gone. It's acknowledging, I really love that person who's not here anymore, and I miss them. And no matter what I do, that's not crazy. I'm trying to cope. People say to me, is what I'm doing normal. And usually it's, noon and I'm in my pajamas eating soup and watching something stupid on TV. And I go, why are they asking me? But I realized that the question I ask myself, I don't ever ask, is it normal? I ask, is it serving the kind of life I want to live? So if it's not the life I want to live, can I change it? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it's no.
Is it serving the life I want to live?
Right.
That's a great question. That's a great question. It's amazing that this community is just interacting with each other at this point, right? It's like a common ground where people can just share their stories and feel seen and heard. And I think that's the magic of you, Jan, which is that, and that's what I think is amazing about this book, is that no matter where you're at in the grief process, there's a section that you can read with some tips and tools, sometimes meditations, for you to feel heard. You don't even try to get people necessarily out of it. It's just for people to know that wherever they are, it's okay. And I love that about the book. And I love that about the page and the way how people interact. Sometimes that's all we need when we're grieving. Would you say that that's the truth?
It's, and I don't totally understand it, but it's a gift that I've been given. Somebody just wrote me about the book and she said, how did you get inside my mind and know what I was thinking? And I get that a lot, that I can articulate what other people are feeling, but don't know how to say. And I've also been doing this for long enough that I know that sometimes the light or the laughter has already come back in and we don't want to see it. It's just so hard to say, wait a minute, I started laughing again 3 months ago and I still think I'm sad all the time, and I'm not really. And I am on the page and I do interact with people. People message me and they email me, and some of the stories are just unbelievably sad. But yes, people make friends on the page. They make lifelong friends. And I always warn them. I say it's Facebook and I have no control over what happens outside the page. But people, I'm always surprised because the page has gotten so big now. Somebody talked about their child dying, which is a really tough grief, and 230 people responded. So this one person asked a question. I have a question of the day, which usually comes from other people, and they get to know how anywhere from 11 to over 200 or 300 people feel about the same thing and how they've coped with it. That's why everybody shares their own experience, because my experience, what worked for me might not work for you. So
exactly.
Be so arrogant that I've read 2 lines on Facebook and I think, well, Laura, it's what you should do. No, it's like, I'll just tell you what I did. And if I hate that word, if it works in your framework, then you pick it up. And if not, you put it down.
That's amazing. And for all the Facebook friends that have just joined in, we're talking to Jan Warner, who wrote a book called Grief Day by Day, and also has a Facebook page with 2.4 million followers. And it's a haven where people are able to discuss their grief. And Jan had created that because of her own grief that she has been experiencing and still experiences over the loss of her husband, Artie. And so we're excited to have her right now. If you have any questions, please jump on the comments and please let's talk to Jan Warner. It's very exciting that you're here. Jan, I have a question about your publisher who wanted you to get rid of the suicide section in the book. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, the publisher gave me an outline where I had to have a different topic for each week. So there's 52 topics. I had to have 7 quotes for each topic and an exercise. And so what I decided to do would be, I would talk about topics like despair, fog, when your family abandons you, physical illness. And then I would have what I call resting spaces. So there would be subjects like beauty and
music
and love and faith, which makes the book, some people start at the beginning, go all the way through. Other people say, I really need to read about this. But when I was talking about despair, or the one I fought the hardest for was suicide. And they would always want me to say, can you make that a little bit more cheery? And I would say, no, the hope and the cheerful bits are in the parts that are the resting spaces. But I'm not going to talk about despair and make it sound like it's jolly, because when you're despairing or when you're sad, you need to honor those feelings and ask them what they're trying to teach you. You don't want to pretend that they're okay. And the real fight was about suicide, because I called it suicide and she wanted me to call it contemplating the end. And I said, people that are thinking about taking their own lives are not contemplating the end. They're sitting there with a gun next to them, putting a bullet in. And if they open the book and they don't see the word suicide and they die, it's your fault, because I'm not going to be dishonest about anything. The only way, I mean, I never thought that I would live my life openly on Facebook. That was not my intention. But it's through that honesty that we all realize that we're alone, but we're not alone, that we have commonality. And I'm not going to write a little cheery anecdote about how desperate I am at the moment or how I feel like killing myself. But I will write something under hope or under faith or any of those, that because of the balance. One of the things I did when my husband first died was I went to bereavement groups, I went to counseling. It was grief. And then I went, wait a minute, this is all really sad. And I started taking comedy sketch writing. And the teacher was, because I'm in New York City, who was from Saturday Night Live, and he'd get this like absolutely outrageously funny over the top piece, and he'd go, who wrote that? And it was always me. So it's, how do you add the things in? I don't have to deny the sadness to add in the laughter. I can do both at the same time.
And I love that, because you are recognizing the complete tapestry of what grief is. And I honor you for keeping the suicide chapter, because I'm quite sure that some people, they don't want to, it's not called anything else but suicide. You know, I'm feeling like killing myself. This is suicide. This is what I want. And then bam, suicide chapter. Let me read about it. And and have you experienced people saying, yes, this is particularly this chapter? Have you experienced people say that helped me? Because I can assure you that when you're grieving, it's a thought.
I did. I have a friend who I never met her husband in person, and he's got the biggest smile in the world. And he took his own life. And she said the first thing she did was she opened my book and she went to the suicide chapter. So yeah, that's when I don't like rules. My mother was very rule bound, and I'm very like, my rule is not to have any. So at first I didn't like the outline, but I actually love the outline because it forced me to cover so many different things. And because of the quotes, you not only get me, but you get some of the best writers in the world. And I forgot I told you, I had read a poem that I'm going to say now, so I don't forget it again. And it's by Mary Oliver, and it's called The Uses of Sorrow. And it goes something like this. Somebody I loved once gave me a box of darkness. It took me many years to discover that also was a gift. And when I read that, I understood, because I'm not, if you want to hear atrocities and see me get angry, tell me, it's all good. I'm not one of those people. But what I did with the grief was I learned that there were gifts in it that were inexplicable. And I guess the biggest gift that it's been, well, two. One is, I'm not sure my husband could have handled grieving for me. So the biggest gift you can give for somebody is to have them die before you, which sounds really weird, but it's true. But the other gift is, who knew that I would create this page and that I would have a real purpose in my life? There are other people that talk about that, and I'm not the only person that has taken tragedy and turned it into purpose. There's a woman whose son took his own life, Ann Geddes, and she goes to schools and fights against bullying. There's somebody whose son dies of cancer, and he wants to educate people about child's cancer. So I always tell people that are feeling like there's nothing for them to do to look into their loved ones' remembered eyes. or look into the eyes in a picture and ask them for advice and listen. They might hear something or imagine it, but what did your loved one do or love, and what can you do to honor them that will give you a sense of purpose? And it just turned out to be big, but it could be little. I'm just, without the question, I bought a plaque in the first month of my grieving, and it said, have an adequate day. And it made me laugh, and I still have it, because a lot of days I can do that. Have a good day. Don't pressure me. I can't have a good day, but I can have an adequate day.
I love it. In the beginning stages, adequate days are enough, right? Adequate days are, I just had an adequate day. That's awesome. And I love that story. And I love how, they say that the deeper the wound, the more light can stream through. A lot of times we can change and morph our pain into purpose. And you have done that, Jan. And it's a light for so many people around the world. And the beauty is that you say, I'm just a regular person who experienced pain. This is just little old me. And in the meantime, there's a connection that you've created with the entire world. And that's possible. That's possible. It's a lot of light. It's a lot of light, Jan.
No, I thank you. I learned it from my husband. We still have things to learn. I have a lot of evidence that there's consciousness after death. Is there? I don't know. Every time I say there isn't, I feel him going, hello, I'm here. But what can we learn? I think I don't know why I'm quoting people, but I think it's Mitch Albom says, death ends a life, but it doesn't end a relationship. I learned something beautiful about your grandmother today, and that's because you were willing to talk about her. People say, what do I say to somebody who's lost somebody? Ask them what they miss about them. Yes. If they died 10 years ago, say, what do you still miss about your mom or your daughter or your husband or your best friend or your pet? And then you open a door instead of slamming one shut. If you say you have to move on, you have to this, you're slamming a door. We have stories to tell.
What do you miss about that person? That's beautiful. You also had mentioned, if someone is still grieving, you appreciated what from people? If someone is still in the height of grief after many years, there's a sentence that you said that you really appreciate.
Yeah, I like it when people say your grief is so new, because it is every day. It's a new challenge. And especially, you mentioned, I think at the beginning with the pandemic, I spent 10 years forcing myself not to isolate. And then for the past year, I've had how to learn how to isolate. And I'm not like a fully functioning person every day. Some days I wake up and I go, and I put my granddaughter's face right in front of mine. I have an 8-year-old granddaughter who I never would have met were I not still alive, and she's delightful. And I say, what's the one thing I can do today? I go back to, at the very beginning, I always gave myself a chore for the day. It could be taking a 5-minute walk. It could be paying one bill. But at the end of the day, even if it had 24 hours and I had watched 17 DVDs, or people are joking, all of Netflix, we didn't have Netflix 11 years ago. One thing that I could do, and then I find that if I do the one thing, then a lot of times the second, third, fourth, and fifth things follow. So
yes,
for showing up and helping other people, because I've also said at the beginning, I spent a lot of time in bed, but I could go on Facebook and find somebody who was struggling and talking about how unhappy they were. And I could write something that was supportive. And there are people that I'm still friends with 7 years later, just because on Facebook, I put, I know you're having a really hard time. It was one sentence. I could do that, but then I was thinking of them. I wasn't thinking about me.
It's helpful. It's helpful sometimes just to get out of your head and help someone else. Yep. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And I love, there's a part in your book where you say, you may not be doing these big movements or exercises, but if you could just move one little finger, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's just even just little teeny movements are little victories. Have an adequate day, step by step, day by day, and hence the title, Grief. day by day.
And we do it all.
Simple practices.
Mother
Yes.
Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Some people can go out and accomplish a lot in the world. Some people, I don't know, they bake cookies for somebody, or they write a poem that nobody will ever see. It doesn't have to be big. And that's why I'm still so astonished that I really meant, and I remind myself, my goal was to reach one person, and somehow it turned much larger, but it's still my goal. And then to hold that in and say, I hope my husband's proud of me. And when people say that's the other thing I like, is when people say, he's really proud of you. I like that acknowledged. So I hope he is.
I know. And I love, you've said to me before, he's the most alive, dead person you know.
And everybody,
right?
But that's what I learned. I thought it was just him. But I've met people that are famous, and I've met people that aren't famous. I've met people that are all kinds of people. And the person they love who died is the most alive person that they know. Even sometimes when somebody has a miscarriage or a stillborn baby, people think it's not important, but they love that child, even if they had a miscarriage at 3 months. So that's important. Every grief is important. Even during the pandemic, having your mother die and you can't be in the hospital with her is a big grief. But we have the little griefs of our lives being changed.
Not being able to go to graduation, not being able to have your show go up.
Exactly. I love it. My life was theater and travel.
Yeah.
I'm a lucky person. I'm not going to be evicted, but I have had to redo my whole life. It's okay to grieve about that. And I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask because it keeps flashing in the back of me. The other thing is we do what we can. There was one thing, so I'm going to share it again, that I really thought that everybody would run away from if I told them. And so I waited a long time. And then I posted, because when I say, what's the craziest thing you've ever done while you're grieving? I always say, remember, you're on Facebook, and it's an open page, because sometimes somebody will post something and then they go, oh my God.
Right.
I thought I would put my husband's ashes in an urn, but I didn't. I kept them in the original plastic bag, closed, and I put them in a pillow on my bed. And because I like him next to me, and it's a decorative pillow. My daughter knows he's in the pillow, so she won't just toss it out. And when I did that, I found out there are lots of people all around the world that have the ashes of their loved ones on a pillow on their bed.
Wow.
So whatever you're doing, if you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting somebody else, that's what you're doing. You're coping. If you've left their room the same, if you've given everything away the first day, you can't do it wrong. You can't grieve wrong. Somebody just wrote me and said, at what point do I go from being a griever to being a victim? And I said, never. It's that same thing again. You're not a victim of your grief. There isn't a timeline for it. It's not one step forward. It's whatever your path is, and you'll find it. And if you get off the path, sometimes being lost in the woods, you find a beautiful flower or a little animal that you had never seen before. So it's being lost.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and we joke about it because we're friends, because you talk about the sunflower and the darkness in the center. Can you say that analogy?
Yeah, that was a model I made up from a different model, so it's not totally original. But a sunflower has a dark center, and it's always going to have a dark center. And then it's got all these bright yellow petals. So that's what grief is. There's a part of me that's in my center, is the empty space where my husband should be, and he is, but not in the same form as me. And I want to be able to look in his eyes and hear his voice and all the kind of things. And he's dead. He's just still dead. But I have all these amazing yellow flowers, because in my life, I've done all these magical things because I've showed up and made plans. I always make plans because I never want to go anywhere. But if I have a plan, then I go, and then surprise, I have a good time. I didn't have a good time for the first 6 months, but I showed up until I accidentally had a good time. So you have to leave room for accidentally having a good time. And the sunflower also, I've been told, faces the sun. So if we can face the person that we love, and feel their warmth still on us, that helps us grow too.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it goes back to being a grief whisperer and knowing that, yes, there's this dark center, but yes, there's also the beautiful petals on the outside, you know, and
sorry.
And of course, you know that we're friends, and you know that my theory of life is that inside that dark center actually is the sun.
And that's what I mean about everybody. That's why I always talk about people that have asked to be released from grief, because just because my way is not to date and to talk about a dark center, if your dark center is totally gone and it's filled with sunshine completely, I love that. I put myself around people that there's a group called the Journey of Hope, and it's made up of people who have had a loved one murdered, and they've become friends and forgiven the people that murdered their loved one. And I like being around those people because I don't have that in me, but I learned so much from them. So yeah, it's light and darkness and everything in between. And again, it's what serves, who are you? It's because I'd always rather be authentic than pretend. Yes. My belief is that we're given a full rainbow component of emotions for a reason. So I don't think sadness is bad. I don't think anger is bad. I don't think happiness is good. Some are obviously more pleasurable than other ones, but I think each emotion has something to teach us. But if you only have the one emotion, then you're not getting the advantage of the canvas. So if I don't give myself any room for joy, then I'm not being fully me. If I don't give myself any room for sadness, I'm not being fully me either.
Right.
It's like, it's.
I have this theory that we're all joined through some semblance of pain. And that's why we all bleed red. We're all the same. You look into a person's eyes, you think they've got a really great life. They've got everything they could ever want. You have like this vision of this person has it all. And yet, if you were to unpack their story, there's pain. There's pain with everyone. So there's this grief through line, but underneath the grief for me is this light. It may take an uncovering to get there, but that exists. It's a matter of doing little things to uncover it. And what I love about your book and about your page is that one of the first things you can do to uncover this light that's underneath us all is to accept wherever you are and say it's okay. Because the more you fight with yourself and say, I should be happy by now, the more you're just going to stack on that pain and not allow the uncovering to unfold. So I know that the light has streamed through with you because there's evidence of it. There's 2.4 million people feeling inspired by something that you created. And your book also is an audiobook too. And by the way, where can we get that audiobook, Jan?
You can, it's at Amazon.com, but it's been around enough that if you Google it, you will find it everywhere. Bookstores I never even heard of have it. So some people don't like Amazon.com. Some people love Amazon.com. But if you put in, and I think you're going to put a link to it, if you put Grief Day by Day, Simple Practices and Daily Guidance for Living with Loss, that wasn't my title, by Jan Warner, it will come up. And libraries have it. You can ask your library to order it. If you go on Amazon, somebody wanted to donate copies to their local library, and when the librarian saw the reviews on Amazon, she said, well, buy 5 copies. So if you can't afford it, that's another option. And you can also contact me and I will send you a copy. Like somebody in Paraguay couldn't get one, so I sent her a copy.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because when people get a copy, they inevitably get more copies for their family and friends. Because it is an absolute amazingly good resource. There is a question. Melissa Jones asks, I love your directness about this topic, and I wonder, do you find that one of the biggest challenges of most people experiencing grief have Is it feeling uncomfortable about sharing those feelings with people?
Definitely. I wouldn't have 2.4 million likes if people would just be willing to talk about grief. I think in some ways, as flattering as it is, and as glad as I am that I'm able to be supportive, the best thing would be if people could find support from their own family and friends. I also have had the experience where I have two best friends who stopped talking to me, one fairly quickly, the other over time. So I also understand in terms of accepting things. A lot of people stop talking about their grief because they don't want to hear it. Everybody says, move on. Why are you still talking about him? I had a friend that was a very sweet, loving woman. And I thought I had made up this clever line where I said, I'm okay without being okay. I don't mind not being okay. And she said, you're still not okay? And it was 2 weeks after my husband died. So that's why people don't talk about it. But when I talk about it, then people will tell me their story. And that's why I say, if you say, I heard your mother died 10 years ago, what do you miss? You're opening a door so that they can talk about it. But yeah, people are uncomfortable. And I have new friends because everybody who's in my life now knows they're going to hear stories about my husband. And sometimes I'll say, do you want me to still go on about him? And they go, oh, yes, please. So people feel like they're really good friends with him and they've never met him.
That's beautiful. Keep them alive. Keep them alive. That's the best way. And it also starts reclaiming those memories, and that's my favorite chapter of the book, by the way, is reclaiming those memories, because sometimes you think, gosh, I can't even look at this photo. I can't open this drawer of jewelry. I can't look at these clothes. Everything is equal to pain, and there's a way to keep them alive and reframe that picture.
Some of the exercises in the book you won't find anywhere else because I made them up. This one I didn't. One of the nastiest, meanest, cruelest things grief does is to taint our memories. And there's an exercise that they use with soldiers with PTSD, and it's called rolling your memories backwards. So what you do is you take a special memory and you lay down and you close your eyes, and with or without music, you go back to the time the memory happened. Because when the memory happened, you didn't know that the person was going to die and that it was going to be a painful memory. So you go back in time and you remember how you felt, what it smelled like, what it looked like. You try and access all those feelings of joy and happiness. And when you feel that you're really centered in that memory as it was at the time, then you bring it back to the present. I did that. Artie used to dance with me, and I'm really klutzy. We called it thug dancing. And he used to sing As Time Goes By in my ear. And I was in a restaurant early on, and they started playing As Time Goes By. Oh, remember when we used to be able to go in restaurants without even thinking about it? And I quickly said, I'm going to take this song and move it from the bad column to the good column, because I loved when he did that. Making me sad and angry. And eventually I made it a ringtone on my phone. But it's like, reclaim your memories. Don't let grief steal them.
Beautiful.
I'm sad I can't do this anymore, but I still want to be happy I did it.
That's beautiful. There's a question here from Richie, a dear friend of mine. What would a family do or need to heal from a loss of a family member? He's currently experiencing this right now.
One of the things I suggest is that you ask people what they need. One of the things I started saying to people is whatever would most help you, pretend I just said it, because people need different things. So one family might feel more comfortable grieving separately. Another family might want to sit around and light candles and share stories. So to go to each family member and say, what can I do that would make you feel better? And if they say nothing, say, I accept that. But if there ever is something you think of, no matter how strange it is, let me know.
Right. And I think he's asking, what would the family, what does the family do to handle and heal from the loss of somebody in their own family?
Like, well, that's why I'm saying, because I'm asking in our family, like on New Year's Eve, we light candles and we put the family member's picture. We invite our dead people to be with us on a family level. It's like we have Thanksgiving with our dead people and our living people. Not everybody would be comfortable with that. So
I see.
for me, in my point of view, my experience is I like to include the family member and say, I don't know which family member died, but let's say you have a child that died. Like some people, when a child dies and somebody says, how many children do you have? They don't know whether to say they have 2 or 3 children. But to talk and to respect and to know that that person is always going to be missing, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time as a family. And it's okay.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Let's go on a picnic and think about how much better it would be if so-and-so was here, but also know that maybe they're looking down or maybe they're included in some way, which is different than saying, well, they would want you to be happy. It's like, let's say you go on that picnic and then you all start crying because it's only been 2 weeks. We'll start crying. But if you start giggling and laughing because your family member always said this really funny thing and you say it and it makes you laugh, it's not bad. And
that's so beautiful, Jen.
Pulling it together. It's the person who's dead is gone and not gone. But if somebody says, I can't go on a picnic right now, it hurts too much, not to go, well, you're a blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, how do you feel if we go on the picnic and you stay home?
Got it. And I love.
I mean, it's social distancing. It could be a walk in the park. It could be, before I sold the house we lived in, I put tea lights on the floor where the hospital bed had been. And his friends came over and we all sat around the tea lights and told stories.
Oh.
So that's what I mean. It's hard without knowing the family. It's like, let's say it's a holiday coming up and it's difficult this year because some people shouldn't be together for the holiday because somebody might be vulnerable to COVID. But even on Zoom, it's like the first holiday, somebody might want to be there and that should be good. And somebody will celebrate by making their loved one's favorite recipes, even though they're not alive anymore because they used to cook together. Somebody else will say, I need to be alone. So that's what I mean about the respect. But I can celebrate my husband's life, even though he's dead. And I can still leave, like I used to on dates, because grief can intensify around dates. I used to hide, and I don't do that anymore. But my daughter sang unhappy. My birthday was my wedding anniversary, which was great. When he was alive, not so much. My daughter said, unhappy birthday to you, which was really funny. So I had an unhappy birthday for a while. It's what I was going somewhere with that, and I don't know where it is. There's another thing that you could do is if you're out somewhere and you feel this wave of pain come over, you can either close your eyes or just look down and really feel the pain, and then open your eyes and notice specific things. Oh, somebody's wearing a blue sweater. The table has a little bit of dust on it. And then see if the pain is manageable. If it isn't, look down again and say, this really hurts being here without my person. Or I did this in a theater once. A husband put his wife's sweater on her back. I said, this really hurts. And look down and then look up again. So there are also exercises you can do when you're trying to be out in the world and you just get whacked by grief and you're not sure how to react. So you can always say, I always say, if you're in a group of people, you can always say, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. They don't know you're going to the bathroom to cry. They think you just have to go to the bathroom.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, first of all, invite that person into family things. So it's sort of like it's not a matter of like, well, one thing you did say is respect wherever you are. So if you need to wallow, then wallow.
Tell him specifically what to do because that family it might not work for.
Right.
And my granddaughter is used to that. She's 8 and she's not scared of death. She thinks grandpa already loves her, even though he's dead. So another family might find that very uncomfortable. So that's what I say in terms of respecting. Yeah,
it's all different for every person, but I do appreciate the concept of you know, you can still laugh with the person even if they're gone. You can still honor their memory and be with them and joke as if they're there, and reminisce as if they're there, and play music as if they're there, and still invite them into the world. Because, as we said before, Artie is the most alive person you know. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, he's passed, but he's here, and we're in conversations with each other, and he still speaks with you. You know, he still is very much in your space, and I love that. And there's a way to keep the person alive, and at the same time acknowledge that if you are experiencing pain and wallowing and having epic wallowing fits, it's okay. It's okay.
Good wallow. There's nothing better than a good wallow. I put the alarm on now, but I do want to honor the person, especially at the beginning of grief, that can't get out of bed. I watched so many. There wasn't streaming in those days. I watched so many DVDs. I couldn't function. I had a rule that I could only stay in the house one day in a row, and sometimes I would leave the house for 5 minutes the second day. So that's okay too. But it's the goal, as we talked about, is to be fully alive with grief. You either have to be released from grief if you're that kind of person, and you are. But then as a family, because I know a lot of people feel that, let's say your husband died and you have children. How do you grieve for your husband and take care of your children? So that's a difficult thing to do sometimes, because we all need to grieve in our own way. But when you're with a family, you don't want to lose your family either. So yeah, it's a balancing.
I'm sorry, what?
I was just gonna say, my daughter's best friend John died of cancer when he was 36. He had just graduated Columbia magna cum laude, the first person in his family, I think, to graduate college. And he saw her baby once when she was 6 months old. But he's also a part of our lives, because, sometimes people are afraid to talk about pets. You know, they think that people will not understand that they love their pets. You know, so we have this whole family of my husband and my daughter's best friend and the dogs that have died, and it's just sad. You know, there's a lot of real joy and deep happiness in life, and magic and wonder and awesomeness, and there's also a lot of real sadness.
It's all of it, and that's the beauty of life, really. I wrote this song when I was in a rock band. It's called Supergirl, and it was a big anthemic song. And the last final lines of the song said, "There's a melody to pain. My angel gave to me this song, though her feathers felt like daggers. Were you with me all along?" So like there is this thing, and it might feel like so much pain, but maybe there is something underneath that's just waiting to come out, waiting to come into the world. And maybe there's a way where your pain can actually turn into your purpose, like what happened with you, which I think is so gorgeous and amazing. So I want to repeat to everybody, Grief Day by Day. Get it by Jan Warner.
I have to say one more thing?
Yes, please.
I went to an expensive small workshop wouldn't have been this year, last year, with Richard Banlew, who started neurolinguistic programming.
NLP. And
he did a hypnotherapy trance thing with me. And he said, take off your pain coat. So I'm gonna cry. He said, you've been wearing this pain coat your entire life. I want you to take it off. Is it off? And I said, well, it's kind of, he said, take it off. And I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yes. I said, how are these people going to have a voice if I don't witness for them? And if I don't feel their pain? And he said, you don't have to feel their pain. You can witness it. You can empathize, but take off that pain coat. And when I told my granddaughter about it, she said, I can see your your paint coat. It's black and it has a white collar and it's got these beautiful gold locks on it, and they're heavy and they're beautiful, but they're heavy. And so I consciously take off my paint coat sometimes and say, I really don't need this. I can, it's like you say, I can let the light through, I can let the love through, and I can honor my pain and other pain, people's pain, without wearing this coat all the time. So sometimes I actually leave it in the closet. I usually leave it next to me because it's kind of comfortable. But it's like, yeah. And I owe him for that, because it was a really important metaphor for me.
That was really beautiful. And I love that little Gwendolyn said that. She saw it with the little heavy locks.
Yeah.
And it's time to take that paint coat off. And Janelle Oswald said, thank you for hosting this and sharing this authentic conversation about grief. And I have to thank you too. I thank you so much, my dear friend. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that we're able to share the full tapestry of grief. It's not all dark, it's not all light. It's all of it, and it's okay.
And remember, the most beautiful mosaic is made up of lots of little tiny broken pieces.
100%. I love you dearly, my friend. And Melissa Jones says, this has been absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. I love you dearly.
I love you too.
All right.
And to everybody.
Bye, friends.